The crystalline spires of the Galactic Accord Central Station pierced through the void like fingers reaching for distant stars. Within its heart, the Grand Council chamber hummed with the presence of 73 species, each representing civilizations that had mastered the stars long before humanity had discovered fire. Ambassador Kalen Voss stood before the entrance, his reflection distorted in the polished obsidian doors. Behind him, his attaché, Dr. Mira Castellane, adjusted her datapad with trembling fingers. "They've never called an emergency session for a single species before," she whispered. Kalen's jaw tightened. "There's a first time for everything." The doors swept open, revealing a chamber that defied conventional architecture. The space seemed to fold in on itself, creating tiers of seating that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. At the center floated the Nexus throne, where High Arbiter Ziwaxthara presided, her form a constellation of bioluminescent patterns that shifted with her emotions. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ turned toward the two humans as they entered. "Ambassador Voss of Terra," Ziwaxthara's voice resonated through universal translators, a sound like wind through crystal caves. "You stand before the Galactic Accord under the gravest of circumstances." Kalen walked forward, his boots echoing in the sudden silence. He'd served as Earth's representative for 8 years, navigating the complex politics of a galaxy that viewed humanity as dangerously unpredictable children playing with antimatter. To his right sat the Verati delegation, their insectoid frames clicking with disapproval. To his left, the gaseous Numids swirled in their containment spheres, their colors pulsing with what their species considered righteous indignation. "The Accord recognizes the gravity of calling this session," Kalen replied, his voice steady. "May I know the nature of these circumstances?" Counselor Thrain of the Kepelite Union rose, his forearms spreading wide. His species had achieved faster-than-light travel 3,000 years before humans had invented the wheel. "You may not know, Ambassador, but the Accord shall tell you. Your species has committed an act so reckless, so fundamentally dangerous, that it threatens the stability of this entire sector." Myra's datapad chirped softly. She glanced down, her face paling. "The Viridian Frontier Incident," Ziwaxthara continued. 43 hours ago, a human vessel designated the Prometheus Protocol encountered the Hashkari swarm near the Kelsian Nebula. The Hashkari are a protected species under Accord law, designated as developmentally nascent and prohibited from contact until they achieve unified planetary governance. Kalen felt his stomach drop. He knew the Prometheus Protocol. It was a deep space research vessel, not a diplomatic ship. "Your crew," the High Arbiter's patterns flickered red, "not only made contact with the Hashkari but provided them with advanced technology. Specifically, quantum computing architecture and the theoretical framework for antimatter synthesis." The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began speaking, shouting, or emitting their various forms of outrage simultaneously. The Verati ambassador's mandibles clacked so rapidly it sounded like machine gun fire. "Order!" Ziwaxthara's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Ambassador Voss, your species has violated the prime directive of technological non-interference. The Hashkari were 1,700 years away from developing these technologies naturally. You have disrupted the careful balance that has maintained galactic peace for eons." Kalen's mind raced. The prime directive was sacred among the Accord species. It was the foundation upon which their entire civilization structure rested. The idea that a species must develop at its own pace without interference was considered inviolable. "I was not informed of any such incident," Kalen said carefully. "May I review the evidence?" "Evidence?" Counselor Thrain's laugh was like rocks grinding. "Your Captain Lysander Kane documented everything himself. He believed he was doing something noble. He transmitted full reports to your Earth command before we intercepted his vessel." Mira pulled up the files on her datapad, her hands shaking. There it was. Detailed logs from Captain Kane, explaining his reasoning. The Hashkari were dying. A stellar anomaly was causing their sun to destabilize centuries ahead of natural projections. Without intervention, their species would be extinct in 50 years. Kane had made a choice. "The Accord has convened to pass judgment," Ziwaxthara announced. "Humanity will face sanctions. Your expansion rights will be revoked. Your existing colonies will be placed under Accord supervision. And your homeworld will be quarantined from galactic society for a period of no less than 500 standard cycles." The chamber fell into a satisfied silence. Justice, in their eyes, was about to be served. Kalen looked at Mira, then back at the assembled council. He took a slow breath. "May I respond?" Ziwaxthara's patterns flickered with something like amusement. You may offer words of contrition, Ambassador, though they will not alter the judgment. Kalen stepped forward into the center of the chamber, beneath the Nexus throne, surrounded by 73 species who had already decided Earth's fate. Then I shall respond, he said quietly, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. Kalen stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of thousands of years of galactic civilization pressing down on him. The assembled species waited, expecting the usual diplomatic groveling. An apology. A promise to do better. A plea for leniency. Instead, Kalen accessed his neural interface, projecting a three-dimensional star chart into the center of the chamber. Before I respond to your judgment, he began, I want to ensure I understand the charges correctly. Captain Kane provided the Hashkari with technology that would allow them to survive the destabilization of their sun. Technology they would not have developed for another 1700 years. Is this accurate? It is precisely accurate, Counselor Thrain confirmed, his tone suggesting the answer was obvious. And the Accord's position, Kalen continued, is that Captain Kane should have allowed the Hashkari species to go extinct rather than violate the Prime Directive of technological non-interference? The Prime Directive exists for a reason, human. This came from Ambassador Kix of the Crystalline Communion, whose body chimed like bells as she spoke. Every species in this chamber has faced the temptation to interfere with developing civilizations. We have all resisted because we understand the danger of cultural contamination. Cultural contamination, Kalen repeated slowly. He manipulated the star chart, highlighting the Hashkari system. Counselor Kix, how many individuals comprise the Hashkari species? The crystalline ambassador's facets refracted light in patterns of confusion. The question is irrelevant. Humor me. Approximately 800 million, Zyxthra answered from her throne. Though population estimates vary. Kalen nodded. 800 million sentient beings? 800 million individuals with lives, families, dreams, cultures, art, music, and stories. And your position is that allowing all of them to die is preferable to giving them the tools to survive. Your emotional appeal is noted and dismissed, Thrain said. The Prime Directive is not about individual lives. It is about the natural development of civilizations. The Hashkari extinction, while tragic, would be a natural event. Natural? Kalen's voice rose slightly. Their sun's destabilization is being caused by dark matter currents from a neighboring galaxy cluster. The same currents that, I note, were intensified by the Varadi's experiments with dimensional folding technology 2,000 years ago. The Varadi delegation erupted in clicking protests. That is unproven speculation, Thrain snapped. It's in the astrophysics data, Mira interjected, her voice gaining strength. She projected additional charts. The Varadi dimensional experiments created gravitic ripples that accelerated stellar instabilities in 17 systems. The Accord covered it up to avoid political complications. The chamber descended into chaos again. Accusations flew between species. Old grievances, carefully buried, began to surface. Silence. Zyxthra's command rippled with power. Even if this accusation were true, which the Accord neither confirms nor denies, it does not change the fundamental violation. Ambassador Voss, your species interfered with a developing civilization. This cannot stand. Kalen took a step forward. Then let me tell you what humanity learned, High Arbiter, long before we reached the stars. We learned it in fire and blood, through wars and atrocities, through our darkest hours and our finest moments. He paused, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. We learned that rules without compassion are just another form of cruelty. We learned that following orders, adhering to directives, and maintaining the status quo are not virtues when they lead to the suffering of innocents. We learned that sometimes the right thing to do is to break the rule. Naive philosophy from a young species, Kix chimed dismissively. Perhaps, Kalen agreed. But let me share something else. Mira, pull up the Accord's historical records. Specifically, the intervention registry. Myra's fingers danced across her data pad. Data flooded into the chamber's display systems. The intervention registry, Kalen explained, is a classified database that tracks all instances where Accord species have violated the Prime Directive. I obtained access 3 days ago through channels I won't disclose. Zyxthra's luminescent patterns flashed warning colors. That database is sealed for reasons of galactic security. It certainly is, Kalen agreed. And do you know what I found? In the last 1,000 standard cycles, there have been 247 documented violations of the Prime Directive. 247 times when Accord species, including some sitting in this very chamber, decided that their specific circumstances warranted breaking your sacred rule. The silence that followed was absolute. The difference, Kalen continued, his voice cutting through the shock, is that Captain Kane didn't try to hide what he did. He documented it. He reported it. He believed that saving 800 million lives was worth facing your judgment. Those interventions were authorized under special circumstances, Thrain protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Kalen smiled coldly. Then let's discuss those special circumstances, shall we? Because I think it's time the Accord faces some uncomfortable truths about its own history. The data streams flowed through the chamber like rivers of light, each one a documented case of Accord species violating the very principle they claimed as sacred. Kalen watched as the reality of their hypocrisy hung in the air, undeniable and damningly clear. Case File 17-94, Kalen announced, highlighting a specific record. The Kepalites provided weapons technology to the Frosian civilization during their Continental War, resulting in 17 million casualties. The justification filed with the Accord? Strategic resource access. You wanted their lithium deposits. Counselor Thrain's forearms crossed defensively. That was 400 years ago and the context was entirely different. Was it? Kalen moved to another file. Case File 23-12. The crystalline communion introduced quantum computation to the Velasai, accelerating their development by 3 centuries. Justification? Cultural exchange program. Interesting that it happened right after the Velasai discovered a star system rich in crystalline resonance materials. Ambassador Kix's facets dimmed. You oversimplify complex diplomatic situations. Do I? Kalen's voice hardened. Let me try one more. Case File 7-61. The Numids introduced atmospheric processing technology to the Thurian species, who then used it to terraform their moons. The Thurians were barely spacefaring. They hadn't even achieved stable fusion reactors. But they did control access to 7 major shipping routes through the Parsec Gap. The gaseous Numid representative swirled with darker colors. The Accord reviewed and approved that intervention. Exactly my point, Kalen said. The Accord approved it because it was economically convenient. Captain Kane saved 800 million lives and you call it a crime. Your predecessors reshaped entire civilizations for profit and trade routes, and you call it diplomacy. Mira pulled up additional data, her initial nervousness replaced by righteous anger. The pattern is consistent across every case. When intervention benefits the Accord's economic or strategic interests, exceptions are made. When intervention is purely humanitarian, it's forbidden. This is inflammatory rhetoric designed to deflect from humanity's guilt, Zyxthara declared, though her bioluminescent patterns flickered with uncertainty. The Prime Directive exists to protect developing species from the chaos of premature advancement. Kalen laughed, a bitter sound. Does it? Or does it exist to maintain your control over the galaxy's development? To ensure that new species emerge into a system where you've already established all the rules, claimed all the prime territories, and locked in all the economic advantages. How dare you, Thrain began, but Kalen cut him off. I dare because Captain Kane dared. He looked at 800 million sentient beings facing extinction and decided that your rules mattered less than their lives. And you know what the truly devastating part is? Not one of you has mentioned those lives. Not once in this entire proceeding has anyone asked about the Hashkari themselves. Whether they wanted to be saved. Whether they were grateful. Whether they're thriving or struggling with the new technology. The silence that followed was profound. So let me tell you, Kalen continued, accessing another dataset. The Hashkari have not only adapted to the quantum computing and antimatter synthesis technologies, they've improved them. They've developed their own variations that are actually more efficient than the Accord standard models. They've begun their own space program and in 2 years, they'll have their first-generation ships leaving their system. He projected images of Hashkari cities, bustling with life and innovation. Structures that blended their natural architectural aesthetics with the new technologies. Children playing in parks beneath skies saved from their dying sun. They're not chaos, Kalen said softly. They're not corrupted or broken or dependent. They're alive and they're thriving and they're grateful. Captain Kane didn't contaminate their culture. He gave them a chance to continue building it. One successful intervention does not invalidate thousands of years of wisdom, Kix argued, though her tone had lost its certainty. No, Kalen agreed. But 247 interventions based on profit and convenience do invalidate your claim to moral authority. You don't have a principled objection to breaking the Prime Directive. You only object when someone breaks it for the right reasons instead of the profitable ones. Ambassador Velker of the Saurian Confederacy, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His species was one of the oldest in the Accord, nearly 6,000 years of spacefaring history behind them. Ambassador Voss, you make compelling arguments. But arguments do not change the fundamental reality. The Accord has established rules. Rules that have maintained galactic stability for longer than your species has existed. Humanity has broken those rules. Then change them, Kalen said simply. The chamber erupted again, but this time the chaos was different. It wasn't unified outrage. It was fractured debate. Species began arguing with each other rather than against humanity. Kalen watched as the first cracks appeared in the Accord's unified front, and he prepared for the next phase of his defense. Zeuxthera raised her luminescent form, sending out a pulse of light that demanded attention. The arguing species fell into a reluctant quiet, though the tension remained thick in the chamber's recycled atmosphere. Ambassador Voss, the High Arbiter said, her patterns now cycling through colors Kalen had never seen before. Uncertainty perhaps. Or intrigue. You suggest we change rules that have governed galactic society for longer than your world has known civilization. On what basis? The emotional satisfaction of saving one species. Kalen had been waiting for this question. He'd spent 3 sleepless nights preparing for this exact moment, knowing everything would hinge on how he answered. Not on the basis of emotion, High Arbiter. On the basis of mathematics. That got their attention. The Accord species prided themselves on logic, on reason, on the cold calculation of probabilities and outcomes. Emotion was for lesser beings. Mathematics was truth. Mira projected a new set of equations into the chamber's display space. Complex probability matrices that would take most species hours to parse. But the Accord's translation systems could process them instantly. Over the past 5,000 standard cycles, Kalen began, the Galactic Accord has made contact with approximately 3,000 developing civilizations. Of those, how many have been allowed to join the Accord? 217, Zeuxthera answered immediately. Correct. 7%. Now, of those 3,000 civilizations, how many have gone extinct before achieving Accord membership eligibility? The High Arbiter's patterns stilled. The Accord does not track species that fail to achieve advancement. Well, we did, Mira interjected. She highlighted sections of the data. We access stellar archaeological records, extinction event databases, and historical survey logs. The answer is 1,462 civilizations have gone extinct since the Accord first made contact with them. Nearly half. The chamber stirred with discomfort. Many extinctions are inevitable, Counselor Thrain protested. Stellar events, plague, resource depletion. 307 of those extinctions, Kalen interrupted, were caused by preventable stellar events. Events that Accord technology could have easily mitigated. Like the Hashkari's dying sun. He let that sink in before continuing. Another 419 died from diseases that Accord medical technology had already cured. 273 destroyed themselves in wars that Accord diplomatic intervention could have mediated. 108 were consumed by AI singularities that the Accord knows how to prevent, because you've all faced and solved that problem. The numbers hung in the air like accusations. You've watched more than 1,000 civilizations die, Kalen said quietly, when you had the power to save them. All because of the Prime Directive. All because you decided that the purity of natural development was more important than life itself. You cannot blame the Accord for respecting the natural order, Ambassador Kix chimed, but her light patterns showed uncertainty. Natural order? Kalen turned to face her directly. There is nothing natural about having the cure to a plague and withholding it. There's nothing natural about having the knowledge to prevent a war and remaining silent. You call it the Prime Directive. Humans have another word for it. Which is? Zeuxthera asked. Negligent genocide. The chamber exploded. Species shouted in their various languages, translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of outrage, denial, and in some cases, guilty acknowledgement. Genocide implies intent, Velker stated, his ancient voice cutting through the chaos. Does it? Kalen challenged. If I watch a child drown in a shallow pool when I could easily save them, am I innocent because I didn't push them in? If I withhold medicine from someone dying of a curable disease, am I blameless because I didn't cause the disease? The Accord has made a choice over and over again to let species die when you could save them. That's not neutrality. That's a deliberate decision that life doesn't matter as much as your philosophical comfort. We maintain the principle because interference creates dependency, Thrain argued. Species given technology they haven't earned never develop the wisdom to use it properly. Really? Mira pulled up another dataset. Because our analysis shows no correlation between earned versus given technology and a species' stability. The Velasai, who received quantum computing from the crystalline communion, have had 0 major conflicts in 3 centuries. The Draxian collective, who developed everything independently, destroyed themselves in a civil war within 50 years of achieving faster-than-light travel. Kalen pressed forward. The truth is that your prime directive isn't based on data or outcomes. It's based on tradition and, more importantly, on maintaining your control over who gets to join the galactic community and when. You're gatekeepers and you've convinced yourselves that gatekeeping is noble. Then what would you have us do? Ziwa question was softer now, almost genuine. Save every species facing every crisis? We do not have infinite resources. Kalen smiled. Neither do humans. But we try anyway. The chamber had grown quieter now, the initial outrage giving way to something more complicated. Doubt. Uncertainty. And in some of the gathered species, Kalen could sense the beginning of genuine consideration. You speak as if humanity has mastered compassion, Ambassador Velker observed, his ancient eyes studying Kalen carefully. But we know your history, Ambassador Voss. We know of your wars, your genocides, your centuries of slavery and oppression. Humanity has perhaps less moral authority than any species in this chamber. Kalen nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. The admission caught many off guard. Thrain's mandibles clicked with confused satisfaction. Humanity has done terrible things, Kalen continued. Unforgivable things. We've committed every crime you can name and invented a few new ones. We've failed over and over again to live up to our own ideals. Then how dare you lecture us on morality? Kix's facets flashed with indignation. Because we learned something from those failures, Kalen said. We learned that the worst atrocities in human history were committed by people who were following rules, who were maintaining order, who were preserving the status quo. He manipulated the display to show images from Earth's history. Not the sanitized versions taught in schools but the raw, ugly truth. This is the Holocaust, he said. Systematic murder of millions, carried out by people who believed they were following proper procedure. These are the killing fields of Cambodia. This is the Rwandan genocide. This is slavery in America, apartheid in South Africa, the Cultural Revolution, the Inquisition. Every one of these horrors was perpetrated by people who had rules, who had order, who had philosophies justifying why certain lives mattered less than others. The images were difficult to view. Several species looked away. And do you know what stopped these things? Kalen asked. Not more rules. Not better procedures. They were stopped by individuals who decided that compassion mattered more than compliance. People who broke laws, violated traditions, and rejected the authority of their societies because they recognized a simple truth. Which is? Ziwa asked, her patterns cycling with colors Kalen was beginning to recognize as contemplation. That every sentient life has value. Not potential value. Not conditional value. Not value based on their level of technological development or their ability to contribute to some greater system. Intrinsic value simply because they exist. He turned back to face the full council. That's why Captain Kane saved the Hashkari. Not because he thought they'd be useful to humanity. Not because he expected gratitude or alliance or any strategic benefit. He saved them because 800 million sentient beings were going to die, and he had the power to prevent it. For him, the choice was that simple. Simplicity is not wisdom, Velker countered. The universe is complex. Unintended consequences ripple across centuries. True, Kalen agreed. And those consequences can be severe. The Hashkari might become aggressive. They might use their new technology in ways we never anticipated. They might even become a threat to the Accord someday. You admit this? Thrain seemed shocked. Of course. Every action carries risk. But here's the question that should matter. Is the possibility of negative consequences in the future worse than the certainty of 800 million deaths today? Mira stepped forward, adding her voice to Kalen's argument. We ran the simulations. We modeled thousands of potential outcomes based on Accord historical data. Do you know what we found? Species given humanitarian intervention have a 73% chance of becoming stable, peaceful members of the galactic community. Species left to develop, naturally, only have a 61% chance. She pulled up the statistical analysis. Intervention actually improves outcomes. Your prime directive isn't just cruel. It's counterproductive. Statistics can be manipulated, Kix protested, but her objection was weak. Which is why we're providing you with all the raw data, Mira said. You can verify our calculations. You can run your own models. The truth is clear, the Prime Directive kills more civilizations than it saves. Kalen watched as the assembled species absorbed this information. He could see the cracks widening. Delegates conferring with each other. Old alliances beginning to fracture as the logical implications became undeniable. But there's a cost to compassion, he said, drawing their attention back. A cost humanity knows well. If you choose to help, if you choose to intervene, you become responsible. You have to live with your choices, good and bad. You have to accept that sometimes you'll fail, that sometimes you'll make things worse, that the species you save might not be grateful or might even become your enemy. Why would any civilization accept such burden? Velker asked. Kalen met the ancient Saurian's gaze. Because the alternative is becoming the kind of civilization that values philosophical purity over life. And that's not civilization at all. That's just organized indifference with a flag. The chamber fell into contemplative silence. So what are you proposing? Ziwaxthra finally asked. A new directive, Kalen said. One based on compassion instead of control. Kalen accessed his neural interface, projecting a new document into the center of the chamber. It was formatted in the Accord's standard legislative structure, but the content was revolutionary. The Humanity Doctrine, he announced. A proposal to replace the Prime Directive with a framework based on 3 simple principles. The assembled species leaned forward, even those most hostile to humanity's defense. The chamber's atmosphere had shifted from judgment to curiosity, from certainty to questioning. Principle 1, Kalen read. Life is the highest value. When a developing civilization faces extinction from events beyond their immediate control, the Accord has not just the right but the obligation to intervene. Immediate control? Thrain questioned. That's an impossibly vague standard. It's actually quite clear, Mira interjected. A civilization facing a stellar anomaly they can't predict or prevent qualifies. A civilization engaged in self-destructive war doesn't. We help species survive external threats, not internal choices. Principle 2, Kalen continued. Intervention must be transparent and documented. No more secret files. No more classified justifications. Every intervention is recorded, reviewed, and made public. The Accord answers to the galaxy, not just to its member species. This caused another stir. Ziwaxthra's patterns flickered rapidly. Transparency at that level would compromise countless ongoing diplomatic initiatives. Good, Kalen said flatly. If your diplomatic initiatives require secrecy to justify, they're probably not ethical. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you can't defend your interventions publicly, you shouldn't be making them. The political implications would be catastrophic, Ambassador Kix chimed. Our citizens would second-guess every decision. Yes, Kalen agreed. That's called accountability. Humanity discovered it's the only thing that keeps power from corrupting absolutely. He moved to the 3rd principle. Principle 3, aided civilizations are partners, not clients. Any species receiving Accord intervention is granted provisional membership status immediately. They get a voice in the Accord's decisions. They participate in their own development trajectory. They're treated as equals from day one, not children waiting to earn a seat at the adult table. The chamber erupted again, but this time Kalen heard something different in the chaos. Voices of support. Not many, but they were there. A smaller delegate from the Meridian Consortium, a species Kalen barely knew, activated its translation matrix. The human makes sense. My species waited 400 years for full membership. 400 years of being observed, judged, tested. Our grandparents died waiting for respect we'd already earned. The waiting period ensures stability, Velker countered. It ensures subordination, the Meridian shot back. The Humanity Doctrine treats new species with dignity. Perhaps that's what truly threatens you. Kalen seized the moment. The Accord fears change, but change is coming whether you accept it or not. Humanity isn't the only young species questioning your authority. We've established back-channel communications with 47 other developing civilizations. They're all watching this proceeding. They're all waiting to see whether the Accord is truly about galactic community or just about maintaining the power of the ancient species. You've been organizing against us? Thrain stood, his forearms spread in aggression. We've been organizing with others like us, Kalen corrected. Species tired of being told their lives matter less than your traditions. And here's what we've discovered. Together, the developing civilizations control more resources, more territory and more productive capacity than the Accord's senior members. You've been so focused on gatekeeping that you never noticed the people waiting at the gate outnumber you 5-1. Zhuang's patterns went completely dark, then blazed with brilliant white light. Are you threatening the Accord, Ambassador Voss? No, High Arbiter. I'm offering you a choice. Kalen's voice was calm, measured. You can accept the humanity doctrine, reform your approach, and build a true galactic community based on mutual respect. Or you can reject it, maintain your current path, and watch as the galaxy reorganizes itself around you. Because with or without the Accord's blessing, humanity and our allies are going to help species like the Hashkari. We're going to intervene when lives are at stake. We're going to treat developing civilizations as partners. You would fracture galactic unity, Velker said, but his tone was more resigned than angry. I would rebuild it on a better foundation, Kalen replied. One where compassion matters more than control. A new voice entered the debate. Ambassador Sithis of the Aquarian Federation, whose species had rarely spoken in Accord proceedings. I wish to state for the record that the Aquarian Federation supports the humanity doctrine. We have remained silent for too long while preventable tragedies unfolded. No more. Another voice. The Praxian Assembly also supports this proposal. Then another. And another. Kalen watched as the chamber divided before his eyes. Not between those for and against humanity, but between those clinging to the past and those willing to embrace a different future. A vote must be called, Zhuang's finally declared. But first, Ambassador Voss, answer me this. What makes you certain humanity's way is better? Kalen smiled sadly. I'm not certain. But I'd rather fail trying to save lives than succeed at justifying death. The voting matrix materialized in the center of the chamber, a holographic construct that would record each species' decision for all of galactic history to witness. 73 civilizations would cast their judgment not just on humanity, but on the future direction of the Galactic Accord itself. Kalen stood beneath it, feeling the weight of Earth's future pressing down on his shoulders. Mira stood beside him, her hand unconsciously gripping her data pad like a lifeline. The vote is called, Zhuang's announced, her luminescent form dimmer than before, as if the weight of the moment had drained even her. All in favor of accepting the humanity doctrine and reforming the Prime Directive shall register their assent. All opposed shall register dissent. Abstentions will be recorded as opposition to change. The chamber fell into a profound silence. The first light appeared in the matrix. Red, signifying opposition. Councillor Thrain and the Kepelite Union as expected. Then another red light. The Varadi delegation. A blue light materialized. Set. The Aquarian Federation true to their word. More lights began appearing rapidly now. Red. Red. Blue. Red. Blue. Blue. Red. Kalen watched the pattern emerge, trying to calculate the outcome. The vote was close. Devastatingly close. Humanity's entire future in the galactic community hung on decisions being made in real time by species humans had barely begun to understand. Ambassador Kix of the Crystalline Communion hadn't voted yet. Her facets caught and reflected the lights of other votes, making her appear fractured, uncertain. Ambassador Kix, Zhuang's prompted gently. Your vote is required. The crystalline being seemed to vibrate, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. For 3,000 years, my species has followed the Prime Directive. We believed it was wisdom. We believed it was compassion to allow species to develop naturally, without our interference. She turned to face Kalen directly. But I have spent this session reviewing the data the humans provided. 1,462 extinctions. Species that called out to the universe for help as they died, and we remained silent. We called it wisdom, but perhaps we were simply afraid of responsibility. Her light appeared in the matrix. Blue. The voting continued. The chamber remained silent except for the soft hum of technology recording each decision. Red. Blue. Red. Blue. Blue. Kalen's mental count showed them at 36 to 35, with 2 species yet to vote. They needed 37 for a majority. His heart pounded. Ambassador Velker of the Saurian Confederacy remained still, his ancient form like a statue carved from living stone. His species had helped found the Galactic Accord 6,000 years ago. His vote would carry symbolic weight beyond its numerical value. Ambassador Velker, Zhuang's said softly. The chamber awaits your judgment. The ancient Saurian's eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, focused on Kalen. I have lived for 947 of your Earth years, Ambassador Voss. I have seen empires rise and crumble. I have watched species achieve greatness and descend into chaos. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts across centuries of memory. When I was young, barely 200 years old, I served on a survey vessel that discovered a species called the Mornthax. They were beautiful beings, Ambassador. Their music could make stars weep. Their art captured emotions we Saurians had no names for. They were 70 years from developing faster-than-light travel when a gamma ray burst from a neighboring star sterilized their world. Velker's voice cracked slightly, the first emotion Kalen had heard from him. We watched it happen. We had the technology to deflect the radiation to save them. But the Prime Directive was clear. We maintained our distance. We documented their extinction with scientific precision. And when we returned to the Accord, we were commended for our discipline. He turned to face the full chamber. For 700 years, I have told myself we made the right choice. That interfering would have been worse. That the Mornthax extinction was tragic but natural. I have repeated these justifications so many times they became truth in my mind. Velker's clawed hand moved toward the voting matrix. But tonight, a species barely 2 centuries into space travel has shown me what I spent 700 years refusing to see. The Prime Directive did not protect the Mornthax. It protected us from having to care about their deaths. It gave us permission to value our philosophy more than their lives. His light appeared. Whoa! The chamber erupted in gasps and exclamations. The founder species had broken ranks. The count stands at 37 in favor, 35 opposed, with 1 vote remaining, Ziwa announced, her patterns swirling with emotions too complex to name. All eyes turned to the High Arbiter herself. In cases of tied or near-tied votes, the High Arbiter cast the deciding vote. But the vote wasn't tied. Humanity had won by the narrowest margin. Unless Ziwa chose to oppose. High Arbiter, Thrain said quickly, you have the authority to veto this decision. The change is too radical, too dangerous. Counselor Thrain, Ziwa interrupted, her voice carrying a weight that silenced all protest. For 2,000 years, I have served the Accord in various capacities. For the last 300 I have held this position. And in all that time, I have never once questioned whether we were truly building a community or merely managing an empire. She descended from the Nexus throne, her luminescent form drifting down to the chamber floor for the first time in anyone's memory. She stopped directly in front of Kalen. Ambassador Voss, your species is infuriating. You are reckless, emotional, and dangerously idealistic. You have been part of galactic society for barely a cosmic heartbeat, yet you presume to lecture civilizations that were ancient when your ancestors were still in trees. Kalen said nothing, meeting her gaze steadily. And yet, Ziwa continued, her patterns shifting to colors of what Kalen could only interpret as sorrow and hope intermingled. You are also the first species in recorded Accord history to risk everything for beings you had never met, with no expectation of gain. Captain Kane saved the Hashkari knowing it would bring censure. You defended his actions knowing it might mean Earth's expulsion from galactic society. This is either profound stupidity or profound courage, and I find myself believing it is the latter. She turned to face the assembled council. I vote in favor of the humanity doctrine. Let it be recorded that on this day the Galactic Accord chose compassion over comfort, chose responsibility over tradition, and chose to become worthy of the trust placed in us by every developing civilization that looks to the stars and hopes we are better than they fear. The chamber fell silent. Completely, utterly silent. It was Mira who broke it, her voice barely above a whisper. We won. No, Dr. Castellane, Ziwa corrected gently. We all won. Or perhaps we finally stopped losing. Kalen felt his knees weaken slightly. 8 years of diplomatic service, 3 sleepless nights of preparation, and 40 minutes of the most important debate in human history had led to this moment. What happens now? He asked. Now, Ziwa said, her patterns beginning to brighten again, we begin the hard work of living up to the principles we have just endorsed. The humanity doctrine will be implemented immediately. All member species will be required to report potential interventions for review. Developing civilizations will receive provisional representation. And the archives of previous interventions will be unsealed for public examination. There will be resistance, Velker observed. There will be, Ziwa agreed. Change always faces resistance. But resistance is not the same as impossibility. She extended a luminescent appendage toward Kalen in what he recognized as a gesture of alliance. Welcome to the new Galactic Accord, Ambassador Voss. You have given us a great gift today, though I suspect you do not fully realize it yet. What gift is that? Kalen asked, accepting the gesture. You reminded us why we built this civilization in the first place, Ziwaxthra replied. Not to rule the galaxy but to make it a place where every sentient being has a chance to thrive. We had forgotten that. You helped us remember. As the chamber began to disperse, species gathering in clusters to debate the implications of what had just occurred, Kalen looked at Mira and saw tears streaming down her face. Earth will be proud, she said. Kalen shook his head. Earth will be terrified. We just committed ourselves to helping save civilizations across the galaxy. The responsibility is enormous. Yes, Mira agreed, smiling through her tears. But at least it's the right kind of terrifying. As they walked toward the chamber's exit, Kalen glanced back one final time at the Nexus throne, at the voting matrix still displaying its blue and red lights, at the species beginning to forge new alliances based on shared values rather than ancient hierarchies. The council chamber had fallen silent at humanity's reply. And in that silence, the galaxy had heard something it desperately needed to hear, that compassion was not weakness, that rules were not sacred, and that every life, regardless of how primitive or advanced, mattered. It was a small victory in the grand scope of galactic history. But sometimes, Kalen thought, small victories were how you change the universe. One voice at a time. One choice at a time. One life at a time.